Picture a single drop of water falling through darkness toward an ocean so vast it has no visible edge. Somewhere in ancient India, a teacher once pointed at a drop exactly like this one and then pointed at you. He said 3 words in Sanskrit: Tat, Tvam, Asi. That art thou. You, he meant, are that very drop. And the ocean he was pointing to was God. It sounds like a single simple idea. It was not. 3 of India's greatest philosophers, born 5 centuries apart from one another, read those same 3 words and walked away with 3 entirely different answers about who you actually are. All 3 men were answering the same question, using the same scripture, the Upanishads, and a short, brutally compressed rulebook called the Brahma Sutras. It said barely anything outright. It practically begged to be argued over. They agreed on the words: Brahman, ultimate reality; Jiva, you, the individual soul; Jagat, the world around you; Moksha, freedom from ever having to return. What they never agreed on was how these pieces actually fit together. When the drop finally reaches the ocean, what actually happens to it? That single question would occupy India's greatest philosophers for the next 700 years. Kaladi in the far south gave the world Shankara in the 8th century. Sri Perumbudur near modern Chennai gave it Ramanuja 3 centuries later. Udupi on the western coast gave it Madhva a century after that. Same land, same scripture, 500 years of argument. In the 8th century, in the small town of Kaladi, an 8-year-old boy met the teacher who would shape the rest of his life. Asked plainly who he was, the boy didn't give his name. He answered in 6 verses. I am not the mind, he said, not the intellect, not the memory, not the ego that clings so tightly to a name. And I am not this body either, born once and destined one day to end. I have no birth, he said, and no death, no family that defines me, no caste that confines me, no fear that can touch what I actually am. I am pure awareness, he said. I am boundless joy. I am Shiva. I am Shiva. A child had just spoken the entire teaching of Advaita, years before he could explain a single word of it. Years later, teaching as a grown monk, he explained it more plainly. Walk down a dark path and mistake a coiled rope for a snake. And your fear in that instant is completely real. But the snake, it turns out, never actually was. The world isn't a lie, he taught. It's Mithya, not fully real, and not fully unreal either. Real only the way a dream feels real while you're still inside it. Only one thing underneath it all never changes. Brahman. So if you feel far from God, Shankara said, the problem was never distance in the first place. You were never actually separate. The only obstacle is simply not knowing it yet. You don't arrive at liberation the way you arrive at a destination, he taught. You reach it the way you wake from a dream, not gradually, but all at once. The instant you're no longer fooled. So when Shankara read Tattvamasi, he read it exactly as it sounds, whole and unqualified. That art thou, not close to God, not part of God. You are God, and you simply forgot. The drop touching the ocean, in his telling, was never really a drop at all. It only ever believed it was small. The instant that belief ends, so does the smallness. Advaita asks almost nothing of you in the way of ritual or worship. It asks exactly one thing. Look honestly enough at yourself that the illusion finally runs out of places left to hide. Even Shankara never asked his followers to empty their temples. He organized the worship of 5 sacred forms side by side: Shiva, Vishnu, the goddess, Surya, Ganesha, a practice still followed today. Worship a form, he taught, for as long as your mind needs one to steady it. The deity in the shrine was never the destination. It was the practice that got you there. A philosophy that called the world Mithya never once told anyone to stop lighting a lamp. Every rung of the ladder mattered, right up until you no longer needed it. It was a complete answer. To many, it was also an unbearable one. If you are already God, they began to ask, then who exactly is left standing there to love him? 3 centuries later, a monk named Ramanuja inherited that very discomfort. He had spent his whole life in devotion to Vishnu. Shankara's answer, taken all the way seriously, seemed to erase the very relationship Ramanuja had built his life around. If the self and God are simply flatly identical, he asked, then devotion becomes a kind of performance. You cannot truly surrender to someone you secretly already are. His answer began with an image. Try to find fire without any heat in it. You can't. The two are never apart. And yet, heat is still heat, doing its own distinct work, even though it can never leave the flame. Souls and the world, he taught, relate to Brahman the way a body relates to the soul living inside it, utterly dependent, utterly inseparable, and still, unmistakably, its own real and distinct thing. The world was never a dream to Ramanuja. Souls were never illusions quietly waiting to dissolve. They were eternally, permanently real, because Brahman himself was real enough to need them. So when Ramanuja read Tvam, he found a hidden qualifier folded into it. That, meaning Brahman, together with every soul as his own body. Art thou, likewise, united with your own? Identity, yes, but never sameness without distinction. This is the same monk who once climbed a temple tower and shouted a secret, liberating mantra out to an entire town against his own guru's explicit warning. Because if souls were truly, permanently real to God, he said, not one of them was disposable. His path was prapatti, total surrender, not the erasing of the self, he taught, but the leaning of one real, distinct being into the open arms of another. In his telling, the drop reaching the ocean becomes a wave, fully part of the sea, moving with it, made entirely of it, and still, unmistakably, its own crest, its own shape. Liberation, he taught, doesn't dissolve you into nothing. It carries you into Vaikuntha, God's own eternal home, where you go on loving and serving him forever, unmistakably, yourself. Ramanuja is remembered for something beyond doctrine too. He pushed temple worship open to people the old order had shut out of it entirely, insisting no soul real to God deserved a locked gate. It made him enemies in his own region. Tradition holds he was forced into exile for years, rather than take the teaching back. He never took it back. To Ramanuja, this was never simple charity. If a soul was truly, eternally real to God, as his own philosophy insisted, shutting it out of worship wasn't just unkind, it was bad theology. To many, it was the most emotionally satisfying answer yet. But a third man was coming, born a century later, who believed even this hadn't drawn the line clearly enough. And he would make one of the strangest claims of his life to prove it. In the 13th century, a monk named Madhva looked at both earlier answers and found them still too close for comfort. Even a wave, he said, was too intimate a word for what a soul truly is next to God. He taught 5 real eternal distinctions that never once collapse into one: between God and soul, God and matter, soul and soul, soul and matter itself. Nothing ever quietly becomes something else. Even Ramanuja's soul and body image went too far. Madhva argued, a body, after all, can be set aside. A soul, in his view, was never that kind of thing to God at all. 2 men had already told you what those 3 words meant. Madhva asked whether you were even hearing them correctly in the first place. Split the very same syllables 1 letter differently, and Tvam, Asi can be read instead as Tvam. You are not that. His own tradition holds something even stranger about the man making that argument. Madhva, they say, was the 3rd incarnation of Vayu, the wind god, the same Vayu who once carried Rama's ring across the ocean as Hanuman, and who once broke an empire's pride on a battlefield as Bhima. Even a god's own most devoted servant, Madhva said, pointing to himself, is still only ever a servant, powerful, beloved, essential, and never, for a single instant, the one being served. The world was never Mithya to Madhva, never a dream waiting for someone to wake from it. It was as permanently, solidly real as God himself, simply never the same thing as him. Even in liberation, he taught, souls remain distinct from one another, like vessels lowered into one vast ocean of bliss, each filled to its own capacity. Some hold more, some hold less. None of them ever becomes the ocean itself. In his telling, the drop reaches the ocean and stays a drop, forever inside it, forever distinct, forever gratefully. Not the sea. Advaita asks for devotion without shortcuts, no claim to identity with God, no eventual merging, only service, offered for its own sake, for as long as forever lasts. In Madhva's own lineage, a low-born devotee named Kanakadasa once walked to the Krishna temple at Udupi and was refused entry at the door. He sat behind the temple instead, singing to a god he wasn't allowed to see. And there, the story goes, the temple wall cracked open and the deity's face turned all the way around to face him through the back. That window is still there at Udupi today, and pilgrims still look through it. Madhva's own tradition still tells the story. No soul, however small, was ever too small for God's ocean. 3 men, 3 readings of the very same 3 words. And 700 years later, all 3 answers are still standing, still taught, still lived by millions of people who never once stopped disagreeing. This was never really an argument about facts anyone could go check. It was an argument about what kind of relationship could even make sense between a soul and God. Advaita became the path of knowledge, walked by monks and seekers ever since. Vishishta Advaita became Sri Vaishnavaism, devotion to Vishnu lived out by millions. Advaita became Madhva's own lineage of service, one that would later shape a very different kind of devotion, carried across India by a saint who called himself God's own servant too. Walk into most Hindu households today, and you'll likely find all 3 answers quietly living side by side. A grandmother who prays to Krishna as holy other, A father who half believes he'll dissolve into light one day. A child just beginning to learn any of it at all. Strip away every layer of the philosophy, and each path leaves you holding one prayer you could actually pray. Advaita's prayer sounds almost like a dare. Stop asking to be saved. Look closely enough, and you'll find you already are the very thing you were praying to. Vishishta Advaita's prayer is softer. Hold me. I am real, and so, unmistakably, is your hand. Advaita's prayer asks for nothing to change at all. Let me stay exactly what I am, and let me serve you gladly, for as long as forever lasts. Kaladi, Sri Perumbudur, Udupi. 3 shorelines, 7 centuries apart, all facing the very same endless, unresolved ocean. Somewhere, right now, another drop is falling toward the same dark, endless ocean. What happens the instant it lands depends entirely on who you ask, and maybe, quietly, on who you already believe yourself to be.